March 20th, 2026. Near a village called Nadivka in Donetsk region, a Ukrainian crew from the 59th Brigade is flying a drone so thin the camera barely registers it against the sky. On the other end of that feed is a Ka-52, one of Russia's most capable attack helicopters. This one costs around $16 million. The operator flies the drone into the airframe. The Ka-52 goes down. Both pilots try to run. A second drone finishes the job. The drone that did it cost, by most estimates, around $500. Divide one number by the other and you get 32,000. That's the ratio every article about this war has run with for 3 years. I spent the last month checking whether it actually holds up. It's mostly wrong. Not because the drone failed, it worked exactly as intended, but because that ratio treats one lucky strike like it explains the entire war. By the end of this video, you'll see the real number and why the gap between the two is the actual story of how this war is being fought. You've seen this framing before. A tank worth millions, destroyed by something that costs less than a used bicycle. It's a great headline. It's also a bad model of how war actually works, because a ratio like 32,000 to 1 assumes every drone launched hits its target. It assumes no jamming, no training pipeline, no factory behind the drone, and no cost to anyone else standing nearby when either machine goes down. None of that is true. The real question was never what a drone costs. It's what a confirmed kill costs, once you count everything that had to happen for that one drone to find its target and detonate. So let's build that number properly, piece by piece. First piece. Most drones sent out on this kind of mission don't hit anything at all. Robert Brovdy commands Ukraine's unmanned systems forces. In 2026, he put a hard number on a question most war coverage never bothers asking. Across Ukrainian and Russian FP5 strikes, only 20 to 40% of drones launched reach the target, deliver the strike, and get the hit confirmed on camera. 60 to 80% of the time, the drone fails before it ever gets there. It gets jammed, it clips a tree line, the warhead doesn't detonate, small arms fire brings it down mid-flight. Run the math on that. If it takes an average of 3 drones to land one confirmed hit, that $500 weapon just became a $1,500 one. Still cheap. Still absurdly cheap next to a $16 million helicopter. But that's already a 5-fold jump from the number in the headline. And that failure rate isn't evenly spread across every mission. A drone hunting a stationary ammo depot behind the lines fails less often than one hunting a moving helicopter that's actively being escorted by its own electronic warfare team. The Ka-52 from the cold open falls into the second category, the hardest one, which means the crew that killed it was almost certainly working with worse odds than Brovdy's average, not better. And this problem used to be far worse. Early in the war, a British defense think tank, RUSI, found that Russian jamming was knocking out roughly 90% of Ukraine's small reconnaissance and strike drones by the summer of 2022. The average quadcopter survived about 3 flights before it was lost. 90% losses meant the real cost per kill wasn't $500. It was closer to $5,000 once you counted every drone that never made it. The technology has improved a great deal since then. The attrition problem never went away, it just got smaller. So why did that number shrink from 90% down to 20 or 40? Because of one specific piece of hardware, and it's the reason that Ka-52 from the cold open went down at all. For most of this war, an FPV drone talked to its pilot over radio, and radio can be jammed. Russia built a dense belt of electronic warfare units along the front specifically to flood that spectrum with noise, and for a long stretch it worked. Then came the fix, and it's almost embarrassingly simple. Instead of a radio link, run a literal cable behind the drone. A hair-thin spool of fiber optic wire unspooling for miles as the drone flies, carrying the video and control signal down a physical wire no jammer can touch. That's very likely what killed the Ka-52 near Nadivka. Fiber optic drones are specifically the tool crews reach for against a high-value target worth protecting with electronic warfare, because a helicopter that expensive doesn't fly without an EW escort trying to jam exactly this kind of attack. Russia built entire units around this exact job, driving electronic warfare trucks up and down the front specifically to blanket the airspace above valuable equipment. For years, that belt of jammers was the single biggest reason cheap drones failed. The fiber optic spool didn't beat that jamming through better software or a smarter radio. It beat it by removing the radio from the equation entirely. The headline ratio never accounts for this part. Fiber optic drones cost more than the standard radio ones. Add the spool, the reinforced frame to carry it, and the compatible receiver, and you are no longer looking at a $500 weapon. You're looking at something closer to 1.5 to 2 times that, depending on spool length and who's building it. So the drone that killed a $16 million helicopter probably wasn't the cheapest one in the arsenal. It was a more expensive purpose-built weapon, chosen because the target was worth protecting. The cost-exchange ratio narrows again, and we haven't even gotten to the person flying it. A drone is worthless without someone who can fly it under pressure at night with a helicopter crew shooting back. That skill has to be built, and building it is not free. Ukraine's military now runs new FP5 pilots through a combat simulator before they ever touch a live aircraft, and the recommendation is 300 hours of practice first. Over 7,000 operators have gone through it. That simulator exists to solve an expensive problem. Without it, roughly 1 crew in every 3 to 5 wrecks a training drone learning the basics. Multiply that across 500 crews at a few $1,000s per training aircraft, and you're looking at losses approaching $300,000 before those pilots ever see a real target. Spread that training cost across a pilot's entire operational career, and it adds a modest but real amount to every single strike they carry out. It won't dominate the final number, it won't vanish from it either, and the headline ratio treats it as if the drone flew itself. And that's before you count the strikes that fail not because of jamming or hardware, but because the person behind the controls hadn't logged enough hours yet. Training isn't overhead. It's the difference between a drone that becomes a kill and a drone that becomes a statistic in Brovdy's 60 to 80%. People who run that training program put it bluntly. Learning to steer the drone is the easy part. Finding the target, holding a signal through jamming, and staying calm while the enemy shoots back at your position, that can take an hour of real flight time on a single mission. None of that shows up in a $500 price tag. All of it shows up in whether the drone hits anything at all. Zoom out from any single drone and you hit the part of this story that headlines routinely miss. Ukraine isn't building these one at a time. In 2026, the stated goal is 7 million drones for the year, more than 70 times what the entire United States defense industry produces annually. That kind of volume is exactly why the per unit price can sit near $500 in the first place. Mass production drives the cost of any single unit down. It's the same reason a single custom-built bicycle costs more than one off a factory line, but mass production isn't free to build. Most of the critical components inside these drones, the flight controllers, the camera sensors, and key motor parts, still trace back through global supply chains that run through China. A shortage or an export restriction anywhere in that chain doesn't show up in the sticker price of one drone. It shows up as a wall Ukraine's entire production line hits at once. That's also why outside money keeps pouring into this specific industry. The European Union alone pledged $7 billion towards scaling Ukrainian drone manufacturing. That's not a rounding error. That's the fixed cost sitting underneath every $500 unit that rolls off the line, spread across millions of drones so thin it becomes almost invisible in any single one. That doesn't move the sticker price much. It does mean the $500 figure only exists because someone already paid for the factory, the supply chain, and the workforce behind it. The headline ratio treats the drone like it appeared out of nowhere. It didn't. Russia is running the same math from the other direction. Its Shahed-style attack drones lean on similar imported electronics, which is why sanctions on chips and navigation modules keep showing up as a pressure point in this war. Neither side gets to build these things in a vacuum. Every cheap drone on either side of the front is quietly backed by a supply chain that a spreadsheet comparing one drone to one helicopter will never show you. There's a piece of this that sits outside any per-unit calculation on both sides of this war. Every strike, successful or not, happens inside a country absorbing damage that a cost-per-drone ratio was never built to measure. The World Bank's latest estimate, released in February 2026, puts the cost of rebuilding Ukraine at $588 billion. Housing, power grids, hospitals, roads, all of it factored in over the next decade. That figure doesn't come from helicopters or tanks. Most of it comes from the same cheap, mass-produced weapons this video has been breaking down, fired in volume night after night at targets far softer than a $16 million aircraft. A 32,000 to 1 ratio on a single helicopter kill says nothing about that number. It was never designed to. It's a spreadsheet comparison between two pieces of hardware in a war where the actual cost is measured in a rebuilding bill with 11 zeros on the end of it. Russia isn't exempt from this either. Sanctions, a wartime economy redirected almost entirely toward munitions, and a rotating cast of destroyed refineries and rail lines carry their own price tag, one that also never appears next to a single drone's cost. The cheap weapon strategy that makes the 32,000 to 1 ratio possible is the same strategy quietly draining both economies in ways no per-unit comparison was ever built to capture. So let's rebuild the number properly. Start with the drone. Factor in the 20 to 40% hit rate, and a single confirmed kill needs 2 to 5 drones launched, not 1. Use the more expensive jam-resistant fiber optic type because that's the realistic choice against a protected high-value target. Add a slice of training cost per operator, add a sliver of the industrial base that makes the $500 unit possible at all. Run all of that together and the true cost of one confirmed helicopter kill likely lands in the low thousands of dollars, not 500. That takes the ratio from 32,000 to 1 down to a range closer to a few thousand to 1. Still a lopsided trade. Still one that should terrify anyone operating a $16 million aircraft near a modern battlefield. But it's not the impossible fantasy number the headlines keep repeating, and that distinction matters. Because the real number tells you something the fake one can't. It tells you this war is being won or lost on training pipelines, jamming countermeasures, and factory output, not on a single miracle weapon that costs less than a plane ticket. Whoever builds the better pilot, the better fiber optic spool, and the bigger factory wins the actual math, not the headline. Somewhere right now, an engineer in Russia is looking at that same Ka-52 wreckage and asking how to armor a helicopter against a threat that costs less than its coffee budget. And somewhere in Ukraine, someone is already working on the version of this drone that makes even the adjusted ratio look slow. That's the actual story here, not 32,000 to 1. A number that keeps moving on both sides every single month this war continues. If you want to see how the other side of this equation works, the counter-drone systems being built specifically to break that math back in the other direction, that video is on screen now.